Back into session. We convened the meeting at 6:36 and met in closed session for the items that are on the agenda. We have no action to report out. And welcome to the meeting of the Board of Directors of the Montara Water and Sanitary Board. Today is March 6th, 2014. We've already had a call to order notice that we're all here. President's statement. Let me mention that one thing, we last Friday had a ribbon cutting on a remarkably rainy and sunny day, all at the same time within the span of like half an hour. We have historically had one water tank between the towns of Montara and Moss Beach, just at the north end of Moss Beach, and now we have two, and we have a rehabilitated pump house and a place for our staff to work out of the elements on some of what they have to maintain. It's a facility that they visit and work on every single day of the year, and that includes Christmas and New Year's and all the holidays. We now have, instead of 100,000 gallons there, we now have 200,000 gallons in two tanks. It not only gives us the extra 100,000 gallons of storage capacity, but it gives us the operational flexibility to move water back and forth between the tanks and to empty one for maintenance and have the other one still there. Previously we had one tank and you couldn't do that trick, so we had to do things like put divers in sterilized suits in to work on the inside of the tank while it was still full and in operation. It's a hard way to work. So this comes as part of the completion of our public works plan that we started working out with the Coastal Commission over 10 years ago, I believe. It is one of several projects that Public Works Plan has authorized. Later this year, we hope to have a 500,000 gallon tank constructed up on Alta Vista Road. That one is also part of what's been authorized under the Public Works Plan. But it was terrific to see it. Many of us still remember the old concrete tank that had the ramshackle wooden structure on top that was designed to keep it from falling down. That is now just history, and it's a happy memory, especially now that it's gone, replaced by two brand new steel tanks.
And if you go by and take a look at it, as tanks go, they're good looking tanks. They're really pretty tanks.
So I'd like to especially I'd especially like to thank our general manager Clemens Heldmeyer for his leadership on this. He had a vision and desire to get this done and managed to get it cranked out, and that was terrific. I would also like to thank our engineer, SRT Consulting, Tanya Urofsky, our district water engineer, for her good work. The project took a variety of shapes as things evolved over the course of the 10 or almost 11 years that we've had the system now. And where we wound up, I think, is we wound up with a very smart project, and one that has saved us a considerable amount of money and should save us money going forward as well. So thank you. Let's see, now for public comment, Jim, I understand you have a comment.
Yeah, I'd like to announce that this morning we signed the contract for our new general manager for the Sewer Authority Mid-Coast side. His name is Robert Hopkins, and he's from Big Bear. He has left Big Bear, and he'll be starting April 21st. And he has experience. He is really good at working with people, and he's going to be a good administrator. And I'm really the SAM board is really looking forward to him coming on board. And so that'll be April 21st will be his first day. Thank you.
And I'd like to thank Jim, because he's had to do, as SAM chair, he's had to do all the behind the scenes work of herding all the cats, trying to get contract and letters and communication and meetings together, and he's done just a terrific job of that. Other board members, any public comment? Okay, we have an oral comment from Sid Young. If you would step up, please.
Well, Sid Young, Moss Beach. I too went to the tank dedication and I was really excited, even though the last tank dedication I went was muddy and rainy, and so was this one, but it was still good people, good eats, nice. And I'm just proud that our little district was able to get such a big task accomplished. And the one thing that you didn't mention, Scott, that I think Clemens was the one that brought up when he gave his speech about the sustainability. I didn't know that we were like the most frugal water users in the whole state. So that's really good. And I just want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Items on the consent agenda. Does anyone care to pull anything for consideration?
I'd just like to make a note of on the unaudited financial statement. I don't have any problems with it, but really did not have a chance to really review it closely. And I would just like to suggest that in the subsequent board meetings that we have a chance to review that as a finance committee before that comes to the full board.
All right. Noted.
Item 12 has a typo in it in the headline.
Item 12. Consent
It's on
agenda?
page 11 on the minutes.
Oh, okay. And that would be,
Review and possible action concerning cancellation of the next regular scheduled meeting, F3 February.
okay. We'll find the,
It has a 3 in it. It's just a small
okay.
detail, but
All right. With that noted, could I have a motion for the approval of the consent agenda?
I'll make the motion.
Okay. All right. Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Old business, no old business. New business, item 1, review and possible action concerning award of bids for 2014 sewer improvement project and spot repairs.
So before I essentially hand this item over to our sewer engineer, Pipin Caballero, with new engineering, who's going into details for this, the board knows that we asked for to go out to bid for 2 projects at the last meeting, and we're presenting both projects here. Received some very favorable bids. But before I go into this, I wanted to bring some more good news to the board. Starting March 1st, for the first time that I can recall, this district's rolling total sanitary sewer overflows for the past 12 months is 0. So this is where we want to be, and we've had in the recent 4 or 5 years, every year a sewer improvement project, and it really pays out. So we've really focused in the recent 5 years very much on tightening up our sewer system. So we've achieved a lot on the water side, but on the sewer side, this is, I think, something that's also very notable. We are a community that lives right next to the Fitzgerald Marine Reserve. Again, we want to be at 0, and we hope it stays like that, and we're doing our best to keep it that way.
Let me just add that we've come a long way since we've purchased the district. Thanks to Clemens, the staff, Pippin, this district has really made a huge leap and a super progress. We've come a long way.
could we put a plaque on the wall that says, like they have at Sam, 0 spill, or X number of spill-free days?
Was that Sam because of the wet weather flow, or this when we used to have discharges up here?
Both.
I don't understand
The ones you're thinking of are Sam. Yeah.
So-
And some of the discharge, some of the overflow up here was it's part of how you operate the SAM collection system to decide where it's going to go to have the least impact.
But 0 anywhere up and down with those.
Well, there's our collection system and then there's the SAM system, and they are different.
But they didn't have any overflows either, or
No,
just up
They
here?
had
No, no.
a small one, I
Yeah.
think.
I will say that having an exceptionally dry winter does have some advantage.
It sure does.
Party pooper.
I wanna,
I'm sorry.
I've seen the number of results drop continuously in the recent years, and I really think this is something that's very notable.
Yes.
Now, let me just real quick summarize, before Pippin goes into detail, what this project is about. The 2014 sewer improvement project and spot repairs. We received, I think, a very favorable bid from Pacific Trench List Inc. That was the contractor that 2 years ago received the bid, and the engineer's estimate was, hold on, $587,000 for this year's sewer improvement project and CCTV, and this project came back at $390,000, $791. So Pippin, if you maybe want to go more into the detail than I.
Okay, thank you, Clemens. Members of the board, thank you for having me here tonight to talk about the capital project for 2014. I could start by making one comment about the rain or no rain having an effect on the sewer. You know, when there's no rain, tree roots look for water. And the sewer has water, so actually roots are still a very continual problem whether there's rain or no rain. But if the district continues not using water on the water side, we'll be all good. So, but anyway, in seriousness, the projects have been targeted, you know, with a couple main objectives. One is really dealing with the lines that are difficult for the staff to maintain, the backline easements, and also trying to perform spot repairs and rehabilitations on trunk sewers where there's a higher flow. So you're trying to do both things. A lot of the easement lines don't have as much, many houses, as much flow, but it's harder to clean them because you have to carry hand equipment in and you can't use the heavier trucks.
Now, these are lines across the back of people's property?
Across the back of people's property or across country through some of the more wild zones. So over the years, a large number of pipes have been replaced in the north end of town, and other areas. Lines have been picked up or repaired. And so in this project, we are still pushing on some of the older parts of downtown, including Acacia and the easements off of Acacia, between Audubon, LeConte, Birch, Fairlawn, and easements in those areas. One thing that I've had good luck with here, we've tried various different ways in the past to facilitate getting a contractor to provide additional spot repairs for emergencies or for specific lines. In the past, we've had contracts that hold open for 6 months. They guarantee a price to come back and do work. They really don't like to come back here because it's kind of out of the way, so mobilization's difficult. They want to come in, do the work, and then leave. So what we're doing this year is we've combined the CCTV budget with this project, and we're going to, because every one of our projects now, we do a fairly detailed pre and post video of the pipelines. So if we're already going to have the crew here, we're going to have the crew re-televise some of our oldest sections where our TV information's a number of years old now, and find additional spot repairs and get an assessment. With the prices being favorable, I would expect to come back to you guys with proposals if there's items that look like they need to be fixed. If we get prices, we could present them and you could make a choice on that in upcoming weeks. So we've had good experiences with this contractor. They are generally receptive to working with homeowners if there's interest for their private laterals. So we're preparing a bill stuffer for them to send out to notify people, and they can contact me or the contractor directly to get prices and find out about how to get a TV of their line. So,
This is something that we introduced 2 or 3 years ago, that we essentially offer some bill stuffers that anyone who needs some work done on their private lateral can take advantage of the district contractor being here. And essentially they contact us and we pick them directly. And essentially what the district is ensuring is that our engineers reviewing the work proposal from the contractor and ensures that they receive a fair price. And the advantage of the contractor being here is there's no mobilization cost. They have the specialized equipment to do the repair proper and are able to fix the laterals at a very, very low price compared to a plumber, let's say. So this is something that we encourage everyone to take advantage of, especially the folks that had some problems with their laterals in the past. Please contact us and we can arrange for a contact with the contractor that we have on site, and you can get your lateral replaced at a very low cost.
Actually, I took advantage of these same contractors 2 years ago to have mine done, and it ends up being about half, a little bit less than half the price, and so it's a good deal, and they do a good job too.
So, does that mean laterals just within the area that we're doing the work? Or does that mean laterals within the whole district?
Anywhere in the district.
yeah, we expanded that. Initially, it was just in the area we were doing work.
Right.
But we've worked well with several of these contractors, and so typically their price will be a little higher if it's outside our work area, because they're not digging the street there. And then depending on what needs to be done, it may just be best to just do the work in the yard and not the street portion, or maybe do the whole thing. Then we have to deal with paving that,
Right.
and so forth. But it's they've been fairly receptive to working with people. So
And the spot repair that you're talking about, is that then within the district that they're working in, or are those spot repairs in other areas that you've identified?
well, we've identified some key ones in the bid, and then either from discoveries from Tony's crew or from looking around with the television camera and finding areas that have gotten progressively worse or what have you. Last year, for example, we got notice about this time of a bunch of streets that were being reconstructed or slurry sealed right away by the county.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were able to go in and make 5 or 6 critical repairs under that, so we can kind of avoid digging up the street during the moratorium period. And
Like on Etheldor, maybe?
yeah, down on Etheldor, we did
Okay.
we had 5 or 6 repairs
Yeah.
there last year,
Okay.
for example.
I just have one question. Last time I heard you were a little nervous about the bidding process being more expensive. How come this came in so low, do you know?
Well, it's it really depends on timing and the environment of contractors. One thing we've done is we have tightened our spec to make sure we get a qualified contractor and people that understand how to do this process, since we're traipsing in people's backyards. That can limit our field just a little bit. Fortunately, this particular contractor had just finished up a really big job where he was in Pebble Beach and wasn't bidding on anything. Now he's back up in this, looking for work, so that was a big help. The other contractor that was second on the job had 2 other big contracts. He's just finishing up one. So some of it is timing. Also, I think they know this area. The last bids we had that were high were a little smaller projects and had more encroachment permit restrictions. San Mateo County is relatively easy to work with as long as you communicate with them ahead of time. So I think it's, I was nervous, but I guess that's my job to be nervous, so I'm happy with the results.
We have public comment, Sid?
I actually have a question for him. Should I go up there?
Sure.
Sure, yeah.
I don't care of it.
I live in Seal Cove, and we got recently a notice from Don Horsley that, well, via him, he got like $400,000 to pave a street out there because we lost Ocean Boulevard several years ago. So our neighborhood is gearing up for like August when they're going to pave a pretty long portion of one road and another portion of another road that's partially paved. And I also know Design Review is going to have somebody on that stretch of San Ramon, I think coming up this week or this coming week, for a property that's going to be constructed. So I don't know if that's on your list, because you did say when you know roads are going to go in that you might.
I can answer that. So the county contacted us last year about San Ramon. So we had done several spot repairs last year in Seal Cove in advance of the county work. They subsequently called me asking about some of the pump stations. We have several pump stations that are in the road there. And there could be some potential costs to the district depending on what they choose to do with the final profile of that road, if we need to reset those castings, if we call them. But it's more complicated for a pump station. There's big doors. And then since some of those doors are old and don't have fall protection, we'd want to replace them with newer stuff, if up to code, if we wanted to take it out. So we've actually prepared a design for one of those stations already. We have looked into that. They were debating whether they're going to have their contractor do it or try to have us do it. They didn't motivate or get all the ducks going in the same direction last summer. Then they called me back and said they were having trouble working out their design because of the urban swale requirements for how wide and how much grass you have growing and a bunch of stuff that they were trying to put together because the road's fairly narrow there. So last I heard, they didn't have a definitive design. So I have not seen a definitive design. If they have, I've been working with a couple of their engineers over there, and they've not sent me anything recently. So I couldn't say.
I heard the environmental had held it up, so that might have been the swale issues.
We did replace a big portion of sewer on that street down to what we call Pump Station 3. We did that as a change order last year as an advance of that project. So.
And we did receive, I think last week, a notification of a road improvement project this summer, and San Ramon was not on the list.
Oh, was it?
That's separate. That's a separate contract, though, a different arm of their paving department. That's the Cape and Seal projects. That's general rehabilitation.
This is a complete
That's a
dirt
complete
road.
that's a complete reconstruction, and I think they really hope to get it done this year, but they hoped to get it done last year too. So I'm not sure where that's going.
Election year this year.
So,
I just want to make sure it was on your radar.
yeah, we did a bunch of work there last year already, and if I can get an updated plan from them, I'll review that before our contractor gets off the job.
Clement said we might want to send a flyer in the water bills to all the residents in Seal Cove and perhaps district-wide, letting people know that they could potentially, or they could at a great savings replace their sewer laterals.
Well, we're going to do that for all residents in the districts for 2 billing cycles.
Okay.
We just missed 1 billing cycle, so we're going to see when we send the notice to proceed and how the timing works, but at least half of town we're going to cover with the bill stuffer regarding the potential
Good.
sewer laterals.
And maybe we can put it up on our website and put it on Coast Cider and put it in the newspaper. One of the things that came up at the last SAM board meeting that I attended was the interim general manager suggested getting all the sewer districts to pay particular attention to people's sewer laterals, to put an I&I prevention program in regarding laterals. And I knew we already had this going, but it might be a way to step up if we can make it make it easier for people to understand how much they will save on this.
What's I&I?
Inflow and infiltration is what I&I stands for.
That means if you've got cracks in your sewer lateral, water comes in and it goes into the pipe. Unless they're in the bottom, in which case it goes out.
So infiltration is the slow stuff, and inflow is the fast stuff. So typically, inflow is where you've got cracks above, and daylight from inside the pipeline when it rains gushes in, and then infiltration would be through cracks where roots come in and whatnot. When the water table is up, it all just seeps in. So that's the typical. And he's nodding, so I didn't go too far wrong. Do we have
And
any
of course,
other
the worst
questions?
cases would be, roof leaders accidentally plumbed into the sewer lateral. That's a big one, or sump pumps.
And so so in case anyone watching has their house,
Roof leader,
if
the
you
gutter,
have, if you have the
pipes.
gutters feeding into your lateral, do us all a favor, save us all some money, and give us a call, and we'll help you see how that might be done better. The water should go into the yard, not into the sewer. And we do have something that we do from time to time. There are different ways to find those things, like literally putting smoke into the pipes and looking around at the houses to see if any houses are smoking coming up through
The roof.
the roof. It's not dangerous, and we have done it before, and we have found some very interesting things, and helped the homeowners make minor corrections that save us all money.
So, but it's against the code to do that, correct?
Correct. That is a
Yes.
good observation. You're only allowed to put whatever is normal waste from sinks and toilets from the
The
sewer.
plumbing system.
Yeah,
Is-
in your
is
plumbing
it-
system. That doesn't mean paint or anything else you can flush down it. It's just normal plumbing in terms of what the code is.
If you're caught having your rainwater go into the sewer lateral, is there a fine or is there any penalty for having done that?
We send Bob
Are you
Patasek
worried?
out to
No,
your
no,
house to
no.
pound on your door.
Your water, your next year's sewer bill on your taxes might go up.
No,
For the
no,
whole
we,
district.
no. What happens is our staff contacts the homeowner and encourages them to make some adjustments. I think it's a fairly friendly procedure.
It will not have an effect on the sewer.
No.
No, we actually did smoke testing about 12 or 14 years ago and found a few, and we haven't had much construction since then.
No.
And when our staff inspects houses prior to final, they do check for that.
All right, do we have any further discussion? If not, I'm going to ask for a motion, and let me mention that at the recommendation of council, he asked that we consider including in the resolution approval of the contract documents, including plans and specifications. Do we have a
Oh.
motion?
Before we do that, I have one quick question, and that is, I noticed there's a $20,000 of CCTV in this bid, and there was some discussion at SAM board meeting about why we don't have a CCTV at SAM, and maybe we could discuss this later.
Sure. Yeah, let's take that in the SAM report.
Thank you.
So can I have a motion, please,
So moved.
that includes all the language from the recommendation and the approval of the contract documents, including plans and
It's
specifications?
so moved as stated.
And this, I second the motion.
Okay. So we have Catherine moving and Jim seconding. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Pippin. Now, on to new business item 2, review and possible action concerning award of bids for pump station control panel upgrades Phase 1 project.
So this is, as the title says, for pump station control panel upgrades. Pippin is going to go into detail, and we actually have also a very favorable bid from Telstar Instruments in the amount of $83,670. Recommendation is similar to the sewer side, to authorize the pump station control panel upgrades Phase 1 and adopt resolution of the Montara Water and Sanitary District accepting bid for pump station control panel upgrades Phase 1, declaring lowest responsible bidder for said work, rejecting all other bids, approving and authorizing execution of agreement for said work, and directing return of security deposits. Pippin.
Thank you, Clemens. So as you can probably see, if you've looked at the bid results for this control panel upgrades, the number that was returned by the low bidder was surprisingly low. We called them the next day to make sure they were comfortable with the bid and that they hadn't missed any items. And they acknowledged that they did make an arithmetic error, a minor one, of about some amount of money he didn't disclose to me. But he said that Telstar is an instrumentation company, is the chief competitor to Calcon over in East Bay. And so they sent me a letter saying that they would stand behind their bid and they wanted to complete the work. So I think they really want to make a statement. And we have worked with them in the past on doing pump station controls. As with any design and builder of this type of work, you know, it requires a submittal process to make sure they're giving us the quality of the components that we are asking for. But they're capable of doing the work, and so, you know, I expect we'll do a shop visit to review their control panel before they deliver it to make sure we're getting what we want. So the items of work on this project are going to be including redundant floats and redundant starting systems, starting relays and so forth in the pump stations in case the PLC fails, replacing and improving power, backup power, and surge suppression power at a number of the stations. The price is low enough. If you notice, this is phase one of a multi-phase project. There are 3 additional stations which need similar work, so we might want to approach them with your approval to get additional pricing to complete
my question.
next year's capital work this year. And if you would be interested in doing that, we can provide, we can give them a request for quote on those items.
For the audience, the $245,000 was budgeted for the work. The engineer's estimate was $225,000, and Telstar came in at $84,000.
Yeah. The spread was high. It was at 84,000 to 70.
This is why he led off with the discussion about this was a surprising amount.
Is there anything that is, you know, it's kind of the old saying, you get what you pay for. Is there anything that you will not be able to observe until after the project's completed? I mean, is there anything about this technology that is hidden?
The most critical part of the technology will be for that needs to be reviewed. Well, we have a submittal process for all the key items, pump drives and components. The pump station control panel being built at Seal Cove 2, that one will require, we usually, our standard practice is we do shop testing where we simulate loads and we simulate operations and alarms before they even bring it to the site. And so that's where the wiring and getting it all hooked together is, if you want to say out of sight, out of view, it's the most critical part. It's kind of like the wiring under your dash in your car. You can't get to it easily. So we'll do, and that's where it usually takes some effort. And if we want to make sure, as we're working with them, that they're not cutting costs. And you know, one opportunity we could do is with the price, we could choose to help the quality. We could choose to use a powder-coated stainless steel cabinet out there for a little bit more longevity, as opposed to the FRP plastic, reinforced fiberglass plastic. We'd originally dropped that off because the prices are high, but those prices have come down a little bit, and this is low enough. It might be one of the quality items that would be worth upgrading as we review their pricing. So,
Dave?
Mr. President, could I ask a question? Do I understand that the bidder, the low bidder, did claim error but has waived objection to it, or waived?
That's correct. He did say that he dropped some money in his addition for the multiple stations, but he would check with the owner of the company and see if they were going to hold to their bids. and legally they have 5 days in terms of the way the bid is written. And they sent a letter later that day saying that we stand behind our bid and we have no objections. Please award and accept it.
So they're not
So they're
claiming relief.
They're not claiming relief, and they're not.
With respect to discussions of potential additional work, would that be by change order?
Any additional work would be have to be done by change order.
Has any negotiation occurred with respect to that?
No.
Okay.
Let me mention, the bids came in at about $84,000, about $128,000, $141,000, and $177,000. So quite a range. The next one up was, from 84 to 128. It's a big jump, but honestly, it's a pretty big spread from the lowest to the highest is more than double the lowest.
One thing I could add to it here too, one thing we tried to structure in this bid was to target specifically electrical and controls companies. So the higher bidders, particularly the two highest bidders, are bidders how I had to base my estimate, but they're general contractors.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to subcontract the panel construction, and they have to subcontract the electric work, which is the majority of the work on the job. And so that just inherently builds cost into
So the two lowest bidders are the manufacturers.
are the
panels.
manufacturers and or typical maintenance crew. In fact, the second bidder is Sam's normal go-to maintenance contractor. So.
Do you have any other comments or questions? Okay, with that, let me ask again in the motion that we include approval of the contract documents, including plans and specifications. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
A second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Thanks, Clifton.
Item 3, review and possible action concerning additional agreement with the San Francisco State University to allow use of district property for fog sampling station.
So the district has an agreement with Jim Pettigrew with the Romberg Tiburon Center that allows the placement and maintenance of ocean current monitoring equipment. Now, property has been proven to be an excellent site to collect real-time data that is actually used by NOAA and others for rescue operations and other naval purposes. There's, in fact, a real cool app. It's called Bay Current that shows the on a real-time basis the currents that anyone can download for free. And our station is actually not contributing to that. It's only the inside of the bay, but NOAA has direct access to that information. We've been doing this now for
4 years.
6 years plus or so.
I could go back and find out. They approached me originally and then
Yes.
worked with you to get them access to visit the site and examine it, find a location where the two antennas could sit safely and out of sight. I've loved the work that they've done, and I've talked to, after the fact, I don't know if you recall, there was a sailor who went missing at one point, and he apparently went out solo in a boat through the Golden Gate, and they had no idea what happened with him. I talked to the researchers, and the Coast Guard had actually worked with them to run simulations to figure out, based on the wind and the currents, where his boat might have wound up had he gone adrift at different points, using the actual current data that was obtained using the two antennas on our property. It was very, unfortunately they didn't find him, but it was.
Yeah, I was gonna say they never did find him.
But it was exciting that they have a rescue tool now that they did not have before, and it provides hope for future incidents. It's real stuff, and it takes the guessing game and helps really reduce the search area, and that's pretty neat. And we just get to be host to that. All we have to do is
Right.
offer a little space.
Well, that's a well-established relationship that we have.
Wales.
We have here Professor Andrew Oliphant, who's been waiting patiently, who is interested in placing fog collection stations on the district property. And that is to research levels of methyl mercury along the California coast. And we have, in a site visit, determined that the southwest corner of the district property, that's actually where the two existing antennas for the ocean current project are located, would be an ideal location for a sampling station that would not interfere with district operation. That's from our point important, and from their point it's important. There wouldn't be any contamination. It would be just the air, the fog coming directly from the ocean. So again, we have Andrew here, who's going to present the project. At the end, the recommendation. Before I hand this over to you, Andrew, the recommendation from our side is to authorize the general manager to engage in the agreement with the San Francisco State University. And we also have actually a resolution, so adopt resolution of the Montara Water and Sanitary District approving and authorizing execution of revocable permit for academic sponsored fog monitoring chemical analysis project. Thanks. Andrew, if you want to let us know a bit more detail about what you're planning on doing.
Sure. Let me mention the microphone is not amplified, but it's for the recording.
Oh, okay. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to come tonight and talk about this. I'm a meteorologist in the Geography Department of Geography and Environment at San Francisco State University. And I'm interested in micrometeorology, which is really the study of the interface of Earth's surface and the atmosphere, and so the exchanges of water vapor and energy and carbon dioxide and other trace gases and so on. And ever since moving to San Francisco, of course, I've been pretty interested in fog and fog deposition, and
That's good.
and in particular, the role of fog in coastal ecosystems and in the water budget and so on. And a couple of years ago, I got approached by a guy, Peter Weiss, down at UC Santa Cruz, who had just made some measurements of fog water chemistry and found quite high levels of methyl mercury in it, which was a real head scratcher to a lot of people. It's clear that fog deposition occurs. It was generally thought that it principally occurs from precipitation, but after some pretty careful analysis, Peter Weiss and his group have shown that fog water deposits up to 10 times as much methyl mercury on the surface of our coastline compared with precipitation, rainfall. And the whole geochemical cycling of it is partially understood, but not brilliantly well understood. In particular, the weak part is how the methyl mercury gets into the fog. It's thought that it comes from fairly deep ocean water through upwelling events to reach the surface, and then somehow volatilizes and gets caught up in an evaporation process and embedded in fog. But that side of things. So anyway, Peter Weiss got together a bunch of us all along the coast of California to try and establish fog collection sites. So it starts down at Point Sur and ends up in Humboldt County. And plus there's a site in South Africa and a site in Nova Scotia, just to try and provide some controls. Both those locations have similar kind of advection fog as us, but coming off different oceans. So we don't know an awful lot at this stage about the process or the magnitude, or even whether this is restricted mostly to the Monterey Bay area where this fog has been collected in the past. But the idea is we will establish an active and a passive fog collection station here. So the active one is basically as soon as it detects fog, it sucks air into something that looks a bit like a mailbox, and then it has simple collection devices for collecting fog water, and so we'll be popping out and literally unscrewing one flask and putting a fresh one in and cleaning out the equipment, and then shipping away the samples down to Santa Cruz where they'll be processed in the laboratory. So that's the plan. The plan is to try and get started building deploying the instruments in around mid-April, to try and be up and running by the fog season, and then during the heart of summer we'll be back and forth, collecting as many samples as possible, and then the plan is, it'll all go quiet in September, and we'll spend several months doing some analyses and so on, and with the prospect of maybe starting up again the following summer. So trying to have 2 summers worth of collection.
So my question, other than academic interest in keeping you guys stimulated on the unknown, what just from a community standpoint, what do you hope to learn over the period of time that might have an environmental impact or anything else? Just off the top of your head, what are you hoping for?
Well, principally we'd like to know the concentrations and magnitudes of mercury and not only methyl mercury but other forms that's being deposited on our coastal ecosystems. So the concentrations, one side of the problem, and the other side is the deposition rates, which is also fairly weakly understood. Literally how much water is reaching the roots of these plants. Just also to clarify, the kinds of concentrations they're talking about are not the kinds of concentrations that are hazardous to human health necessarily, but they're much higher than kind of ambient levels, and so potentially of concern in terms of the ecosystem processes at least.
Will you share the results with the district?
Yeah, absolutely.
Give us
So
copies of the
all the data will be publicly available in its raw form, but also we'll be trying to publish this and get the information out through the usual
The only thing I add
avenues
is in
as
the
quickly
summary
as
statement,
possible.
put it in a language that some of us can understand. I was reading this and I thought, well, this is interesting. What does it mean?
You're monitoring, so you've got 2 different pieces of equipment. One is pretty obviously just to screen the water out and collect it into containers. Your mailbox that's pulling it in,
Mm-hmm.
is this doing any active detection of methylmercury, or is this
No.
just...
It's purely, so there's 2 ways of trying to sample fog. One is to try and understand how much is ambiently being deposited on the surface, and those are the passive instruments. Will have the typical one is a 1 square meter
Right.
mesh, and literally it just captures fog on it. It runs down to the bottom, runs into a tube, and then you have a rain gauge at the bottom which just counts how much water comes in. The one I call the mailbox is the active sampler, and its job is really to get as much water as possible so that we can get good samples to the lab. So it's just, as soon as it just has a little light detector.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as it detects fog, it sends a fan running and just sucks air in, past some very fine filament wires, and then the water condenses onto the filament and runs down into our sample.
Is there any thought to, I'm just curious, any thought to correlating against soil taken from the same areas where you're doing the sampling?
No, I mean, no, we hadn't talked about that so far, but that would be an interesting thing to do. There's our soils. There's a long history, especially in a place like this, of changes and potential influences on soils. I'm still not sure how you tease out some of the kind of historic things from.
Do you have any further questions or comments?
No. I have one. How do you determine where this mercury came from? I was just reading that under certain circumstances, the ocean near highly populated areas takes out as much as 15% of the air pollution in the smog in a day. And so how do you know this mercury isn't coming from vaporized sources from manufacturing, for instance?
Yeah, so in part that's the selection of locations like this to try and, like, so we did have potential sites at like Ocean Beach and San Francisco and so on. We avoided those for that potential reason, that we'd be measuring contaminants from other sources, just localized sources. Second, yeah, so that's part of that is site selection of the sites up and down the coast, and secondly, we're going to have some intensive experiments where we'll be doing shipboard collection. So they'll be right out in when there's upwelling occurring, they'll be right in the centre of these upwelling zones and measuring fog water there. So we're trying to kind of capture the full cycle to see what's happening.
I'd hate to think our oceans were determined to be naturally toxic.
Do we have any out-of-pocket expenses in doing this?
Well, it would be the electricity,
Okay.
essentially. That would be the out-of-pocket expenses.
But the crafting the agreement and stuff like that, we don't have any out-of-pocket expense in doing that?
That is another out-of-pocket expense that we have.
Okay. And about how much is that?
I don't think I spent more than an hour on it. I'm not
Okay.
sure. It'll show up
Good
next
enough.
time around.
I would call that minimal expenses.
Okay, good.
Now, I have another question, Andrew, and I asked that question when you were out here, but I want to repeat it to make sure that there's a chance that something like that actually can happen. Is there a way to get some quantitative measurements, how much fog actually is precipitated? We have some indications, I had discussions with our hydrogeologist that fog would actually contribute to groundwater recharge. I mean, minimal. We're talking about very little, but this is something that in this area, could play a larger role than in other areas. Is there a way that the district could eventually benefit from this project, and there is some added quantitative considerations on when you have to think about how much mercury essentially there is, and you have to look at this in a whole. So is there a way that we could actually benefit from this and see how much water do we get through fog?
Yeah, so the idea of the passive samplers is that they kind of mimic plants, the way that plants capture fog water. They're not exactly the same thing, and so you're never able to quantify exactly, how much water a plant is capturing and is dripping down into the soil from these passive samplers. But they're the closest thing we have. And the nice thing about them is we get a very good time series. And we'll have some meteorological measurements there as well, and so we'll be able to look at the rates of deposition of water that we're getting under different meteorological conditions here at the coast. So we'll not exactly, we can't say at this stage, or even with these measurements, how much water is being precipitated into the roots. But we can get fairly close to that number. We can make approximations based on these passive samples. I have, going forward, other plans to try and get at that with weighing lysimeters, where you put these very, scales, electronic scales, essentially, with a whole plant on top of it, and then and then you just weigh the weight of change of the plant as it captures fog and so on. So, going forward, I'd like to attempt to get at that question more directly, but certainly we'll be able to provide, pretty valuable data about the kind of magnitudes of fog deposition that are occurring.
Pippin?
I just ask one, have you compared any or looked at any of the research as to the fog deposition in the coastal redwoods. Is there any correlation to what you're doing versus any of the work that's been done before about how some of those larger trees in the forests here in town might be collecting water relative to a simple surface?
Only in that we're adding more data points to that. I mean, certainly there's fog sampling, passive fog sampling done in around redwoods, and there's various measurements made of tree drip and so on under redwoods. So there is a fair amount of work being done on that. And this, so we're another point on the map in terms of measurements for that. Just one other thing, a colleague of mine who's a hydrogeologist did do some analysis of groundwater in San Francisco and couldn't detect the presence of fog water in the groundwater system. He concluded that that the deposition was certainly in the upper layers of the soil, but he thought that that there wasn't enough to be getting through some isotopic analysis.
So Catherine?
After Sid.
Quick question, is methyl mercury dangerous to one's health? And is it to your lungs or just in general to the environment?
There go property values here.
So methyl mercury is the dangerous form of mercury to human health, but now that you ask that, I don't know what the physiological response of the body is to it.
But you mentioned that the levels at which you're detecting it are well below the...
Well below, exactly. It's not,
Is this in reading Wikipedia that about methyl mercury? It appears that it's created from mercury in the aquatic process, and this is the same mercury that gets into the larger species of fish, so that when you're told not to eat huge fish like grouper or tuna or any of those other big fish because of mercury concerns, it's not necessarily, it's from natural processes within the ocean and within the waterways as much as industrial pollution. And so would this have would your study, would your work have some kind of bearing on this information on where methyl mercury is and how it gets distributed in the food chains?
Well, not so. So what we're measuring is the stuff that doesn't go through the food chain. That's being, that's making it through the water column and out into the atmosphere, and then being transported on land. So, we're examining one of the pathways of mercury and methyl mercury in particular. One of the other pathways is to get into these species and then bioaccumulate, through the trophic levels and until it does reach harmful levels, harmful concentrations.
So I have to give up grouper and eat anchovies.
Don't drink the fog either.
Don't drink the fog.
No, I think the fog's all right for...
Don't lick plants.
Don't breathe.
So, all right.
As things fall apart.
We have a recommendation to authorize the general manager to engage in the agreement with San Francisco State University to allow the placement of fog collection equipment and regular site visits. I wonder if we might have...
And we have a resolution that needs to be adopted.
Okay, so...
Excellent.
So moved.
So let's...
Second.
So you're moving the resolution next in order. We have a Dwight and Bill, the motion and the second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you so much. Very interesting. Love having a little bit of research happening here, and looking forward to your results.
Absolutely.
Discussion that's happened at a board meeting in my attendance over many years.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.
That's a pretty low bar, though, right?
That's a
Thank you very much, Clemens.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. New business 4, review and possible action concerning report from CCWD MWSD Joint Committee?
So at the last meeting, we announced that the committee would meet, and staff was asked to elevate the committee report to an agenda item. Here it is. The joint committee met on February 18, and this item has been placed on the agenda to allow the committee to report to the full board. The recommendation is also, this is a board information item and possible direction to staff by the full board. So, committee
So
is
let
Bill
me-
Huber and Jim Hardy.
Let me mention we have a couple of speaker slips. Do you guys want to hear things first and then comment?
Probably a good idea.
Okay, we'll do that.
You want me to take it?
Go ahead, Bill, and I'll
Okay, so
jump in.
the meeting took place on Tuesday, February 18th, and in attendance was Director Harvey, myself, General Manager Clemens Heldmayer, General Manager David Dixon from CCWD, and Director Ken Coverdale from CCWD, and Director Steve Flint. Also in the audience was former MWSD Director Bob Potasic, and we had a number of discussion items. That the first one was that Jim brought up a recent Half Moon Bay Review article. Do you want to say anything about that, Jim?
No, it was just an inaccurate article that the author says he was misquoted
Yeah.
about recycled water.
Okay.
The author or the person who was quoted?
I'm sorry.
The interviewee or the author?
The person who was interviewed says he was misquoted
Okay.
on the article. Go ahead.
Okay, and then
Thank
the
you.
next person to speak was Ken Coverdale, and he stated to the effect that if we're to have better relations, it really starts by working on something concrete so that we can demonstrate successful cooperation. And we talked about those to a certain extent. Also, it should probably come as no surprise, I had a couple questions myself. The first one was the statement that portable pumps and hoses are in storage awaiting need emergency connection between the MWSD and CCWD. Is this true? Basically wanted to get their response to that. The second one was CCWD want to take us over. They don't have any access to new water. They've sold 200 to 300 connections. They, being the owners of the connections, are currently selling these in the vicinity of $30,000 or more. And once they have fulfilled these connections, will they be a build-out? Is this true? And if so, what are the implications of it? The next question that I asked them was, in what district for water is Big Wave in? And what is your position on supplying water to them? And then I also presented a list detailing things that we have in common and that I felt that we should be talking about. That list includes, let's see here, it includes that we have a common interest in the Airport Terrace, Denison Stream Valley, San Vicente Stream Valley, and the Mavericks groundwater subbasin areas, and how can we both effectively utilize and manage these areas. I also asked them a topic about selling us water, emergency preparedness, the idea of a water pipeline running from CCWD to North Coast County Water District, the treatment of water from MWSD wells at the airport by the CCWD water treatment plant on Denison Creek. If we had any common billing service issues, and also water recycling. And then there was a last issue that was brought up, and this was added at the request of Bob Potasic, and that was desalinization. And so I think, Jim, do you have anything else to add to that?
No, no, you covered all the issues.
Okay, so now the one thing that we did discuss, and so that I'm just going to put it out in the form of a motion, and we had talked about requesting that the MWSD board approve funding for general managers from MWSD, that'd be Clemens Heldmeyer, and CCWD, David Dixon, work with MWSD District Water Engineer Tanya Yarosky to develop a document plan on how to deal with an emergency that would be based on the requirements of the document labeled Agreement for Emergency Water Supply dated October 18, 2010. This to include a list of what needs to be done and by whom, and training and practice drills are to be addressed in the document plan. So I guess we throw that out for more discussion, right?
Yeah, let me just fill in. So the plan, the request is going to be to have the general managers and the engineers meet to talk about how the emergency agreement can be fulfilled. To talk about the emergency agreement. So it's not necessarily to talk about a hard connection or to talk about anything like that, but to discuss how the emergency agreement can be implemented. So I just want to say, I think it's a reasonable request. I think it's a reasonable thing that if we have an emergency agreement, that we should talk about how it could be fulfilled. Because if we have an agreement, an emergency agreement, an emergency comes, and nothing can be done to fulfill the agreement, that's not a good thing. So I think it's appropriate. I think it would not be appropriate to discuss how you can implement that emergency agreement.
Yeah.
I have a question. So our managers talk, and we have this document. I kind of count on our professional staff to do the work it takes to be able to execute on a plan, especially an emergency plan. Do you need authorization from us to do that?
Well, I mean, the request is for a preliminary engineering study to look at this.
So ordinarily I would expect this kind of request to come from our manager, and so I'm asking for your level of interest on this. And
I mean, let me say it this way. I mean, I sure could do this study or Dave and I could do this study on our own, but I mean, this was discussed in the committee, and I think the committees wanted to respect the desire of both boards to be able to report back. And in that context, it was agreed upon that this request be passed through both boards before we move forward.
so if we have enough interest, I'd like to ask if this be brought back at our next meeting as a properly agendized item with, since you're asking for budget description, what your ask is, and what those benefits are. I mean, I think the benefits are fairly obvious. That's not the question. But if we're being asked to allocate money, I believe it's appropriate for that item to be properly agendized.
I think you are absolutely correct. This is essentially the idea that we now turn around, ask Tanya how much money she anticipates needs for this, and bring this to the board.
Okay.
I think that was mentioned in the discussion, and
Well, good. So
that was the agreement.
it's a good step.
Do we have any guesstimates based on your experience what this might be coming to, plus or minus?
I would be surprised if it exceeds, or I would say around $20,000 maximum.
So enough that we need to authorize it, but not a big chunk. And if we wind up benefiting from it and never have need of the emergency
Right.
plan, then
And, I mean,
it'd be well worth it.
if I don't misunderstand this completely, I think the idea was that both agencies share the cost.
Yeah.
That's what it is in the agreement.
Right,
The-
the emergency.
That's clearly the idea. So, okay.
But the other, I think, significant part is that you have something worked out that augments this agreement for emergency water supply, so that if an emergency happens, that there's the ability to act quickly, and that it's all worked out in advance, so that we can perform as needed, and so that if an emergency situation comes up, we handle it properly. We don't have to worry about that we're not